Welcome to Speak On It. I am so glad that we finally got to sit down and chat. So I want you to just first introduce yourself to the audience. Just who are you and what's your title?
My name is Janice Jackson, and I'm the Chief Ed Officer for Chicago Public Schools. I'm a lifelong educator and a lifelong resident of Chicago.
All right, and I promise you this is the last we're going to talk about work, right? Because this is not a blog about work. This is all about leadership, success, and what I call the art of winning, right? And this is for first generation young people who are promised success, right? But we know that it doesn't come like that. There are secrets and what I call these unwritten rules. So before we get started, how do you define success?
You know what? That definition has changed for me over time. If we're speaking to the youth, I'll start with what I thought was success when I was young. Much like our children, I was taught like you can be anything you want to be, go to school, go to college, get a good job, and I bought into that, and I think it was the right thing to do. But I learned very quickly in life that success is about being in a position to take care of your family, whatever those demands require of you, but it's also about being happy. And I will say that my pursuit of happiness and my pursuit to sustain the happiness that I have, I count that as success. I've been lucky that every job that I've had in education, I love what I do, and I just couldn't imagine doing a job that I didn't like. So I count that as success, like being happy and knowing that I can take care of my family.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've always struggled with that concept, quite honestly, because my mom worked in a factory, and it was a job, and so this thought of having passion and being happy seemed like a luxury, and being poor and black and the first and all of those things, I thought for a long time that you just had to work and you had to suck it up and sacrifice. Is that part of your narrative, and how did you get out of that?
I think it is a big part of my narrative. So a little bit about how I was raised. I was raised in a two-parent home. My mom and dad, same story. What I say about that is I really lived the American dream. My father was a cab driver. My mother was a dispatcher. So that's how they met. But I watched them work their way up and eventually own their own company. They own a small livery service on the south side of Chicago. And I remember watching them like work hard. I remember hearing the conversations like, we're going to do this, we're going to take out a loan, we're going to buy this business, you know, and just watching them work through that. My father was very strict. And so that discipline and that suck it up was just a big part of me. And I think I almost take it for granted because it's like innately ingrained in me. So I really think that that he did the work, but I always feel like I'm more inspired. Like I don't want to let my parents down. That's always been my inspiration.
Wonderful. That's beautiful. I love that. I love that. So would you say your parents have been your greatest role models? They have been.
I did, and you know what, I used to feel weird because I think in a lot of schools, I went to an all-black elementary school, like most of us who attend school in Chicago. Most of them are homogeneous, and we are always taught like to have these heroes who you never see, like the Dr. King, and, you know, and all those people really are heroes and a part of our culture. But you know, I don't think other races, their children look up to figures outside of the home as much as African American students and children are taught to. And I always looked up, like when we would have to do those essays, like who do you admire most? I always wrote about my mom. You know, who's the biggest inspiration in your life? I wrote about my father. You know, so I was blessed to have people within my home. They weren't perfect, but I was just an observant child, and I watched what they did, and I really appreciated all of the sacrifices that they made for us.
You're blessed. Blessed for sure. So speaking of heroes and you know, superheroes specifically, I always think that we all walk around with a superpower, right? And I ask that question a lot to everyone, but it's something that you do that better than anybody else. You know, eyes closed. What's your superpower?
School has always come easy to me. So I think that I have an ability to consume a lot of information very quickly and like make sense out of it. And I know how to communicate with a lot of different audiences. And I've always been that way. Even as a child, I could talk to teachers, talk to adults in a way. And I just wasn't afraid to do that. And I was able to like command their attention and respect. And I think that that is somewhat of a superpower.
It is. I love that, especially as a black woman leader, right? I just did a video blog about angry black woman or passionate leader, right? And so what advice would you give to other black women leaders, especially who are slapped with that stereotype?
Well, to me, and this may be controversial, there's a little truth in every stereotype. So I always tell people that, even the ugly one. So you have to unpack and figure out where it came from. The first thing I would say is you have to dive into it and try to figure out why people believe and think that way. My personal opinion is that as Black women, we don't always have the fortune of being able to grow up in a way. We are taught very early that we have a lot of responsibility, and I think when you get that early, I mean, there's a lot of resilience and positive things that you get out of that, but I do think there's an edge sometimes that comes along with that that not everybody understands. They don't understand that walk. But the other piece is, you know, what I would say to Black women is you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of the fact that not everybody reads that the same way. And it's not just non-Black women. I think that Black men have a point of view about how they receive that. I think white men and women have a point of view. So you have to be aware of like what that means and be authentic, but also be self-aware.
So you have a very big job right now, and I think you're doing beautifully.
Thank you.
But I'm curious about purpose. Is this job part of your purpose, or is it something bigger and greater?
I think it's part of my purpose. I mean, to be honest, being a principal is the best job I ever had, and I say that even sitting in this seat. I love that job, and I can see myself doing it again because that was the sweet spot, right? You know, it was about education, connected to students. You had enough autonomy to like shape. You didn't create the policy the way that I do in my role now, but you could shape it and make it your own and make it fit for your community. But I believe so deeply in public education, and I feel like people say it, and I think a lot of people believe it, but I believe it in a place very deep in my core. Not only because I benefited so much from public education, but I believe that a society is better off when the people are educated. I've never wanted to be rich. People laugh at me when I say that, but I've never aspired for that. But I have aspired for like being able to be comfortable enough to do what I want and to be able to take care of my family and to be able to travel. And I'm lucky enough to say that that's the position that I'm in right now. So
I love it. Any last advice that you give to anybody watching who are looking at you as a leader, somebody that they want to be like, and maybe they're struggling, they're on their path to leadership? What advice would you give them?
First of all, don't give up. I know people say that all the time, but there is strength in persevering. And when you win, when you persevere, even if it doesn't look like you're winning, you're winning. Because again, sometimes you can look at people and it seems like they're winning, but that perseverance isn't there, that strength isn't there. And people respect that when they see it in you. The other thing that I would say is walk in your truth, but listen and understand everybody else's as well. I think you're more successful when you know who you are and you understand other people and you're nimble enough to figure out how that works. I think that it's okay to figure out what another person's zone of self-interest is and like work within that, because that's what all of us want. We all want to be accepted. We all have dreams and aspirations, and we want other people to buy into that. And so if you just walk your own path and you don't pay attention to everybody else, it can be very lonely. And I would say it's a longer road than like locking in and connecting with people.
Yeah, I love that. Well, speaking of locking in and connecting, I like to do that. That's part of why I do this. You know, I can't always find mentors who are older, who blaze that trail, and instead I found peers, peer mentors who inspire me, and I definitely consider you one of them. So thank you for leading greatly and sharing your story with our viewers.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Alrighty.